And we are joined now by somebody I'm excited to talk to because I am a huge World War II buff. He's a historian and curator at the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum, Joe Wise. Joe, how you doing this morning?
Good morning, Dave. Good to be with you.
Good to have you. And I mentioned World War II at the beginning because we have a very important World War II date coming up tomorrow that sometimes I think kind of flies under the radar, so to speak.
Yes, sir, we do. Tomorrow will be the 83rd anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor that led the United States into World War II.
Now, let me ask you something, and this is what's interesting. Everybody, it doesn't matter where you're at in America, everybody is connected to some kind of story connected to that anniversary and to World War II itself. Do we have any good ones in Mississippi?
No, we've got probably too many to mention here on the air because we've got limited time. We've got, I can give you a few of the names that I've researched that were casualties from the state of Mississippi that were actually killed in action, and there were about 30 of those, and they represented just about every corner of the state. And one that stood out to me, I was in the Air National Guard back in the 1990s, went to Hickam Air Force Base and toured the Arizona Memorial one day and went through, as I was going through the galleries, I noticed in one of the exhibits there was a Hattiesburg High School diploma. And I thought, good grief, what a small world. And it turned out to be the diploma of a warrant officer on the USS Arizona named Paxton Carter. He was from Hattiesburg, born in Summerall. And he was probably one of the most popular men on the ship, if not the most popular, because he was the paymaster. He handled everyone's paycheck. And he sadly was killed with the loss of the Arizona, and they recovered some of the items, the wreckage site, and that was one of those things. And it stood out to me. Here's a guy from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where I was living at the time, and I thought, we're both standing here on the same spot. And it kind of led to my fascination with the topic of the history of our country, but more in depth on the personal side of it, the personal histories.
Well, and that's the thing that you have to keep in mind when we're talking about, for example, the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. You think about that, and sometimes when you think of a museum, you think of this staid collection of artifacts and equipment and things. No, there are a ton of personal stories just like that at the museum, aren't there?
Right. Each of our artifacts, like I always, in my job as a curator, I like to look at it like this object is a physical object, and there are probably many like it, but it's associated with people. So what we're really trying to do at the museum is tell the story of the people that use the objects that are in there. It's not, some of the equipment is neat to see, and it may be one of a kind, but it's usually associated with some type of action done by people, and that's what we're focusing on primarily is Mississippi history and the history of Mississippians. So.
What would you say? Let me ask you this question, and this is like picking a favorite child. I realize this, but if you had to pick one favorite exhibit you have at the museum, what would it be?
Oh, good grief.
Yeah, I know. It's not an easy question. I know.
I would say all of the above. But probably the one that is hardest to explain and the one I like the best is our Huey helicopter that we have inside. Because people wonder, how did we get it inside?
That's a good question.
They pieced it apart. Familiar with the song by Johnny Cash about how he built a car. I think that may have been the method they used, at one piece at a time through the door. But we had a former vehicle conservator here that was an old helicopter pilot, and he determined how not only to get it into the building, but actually wire it into the electrical system so all the lights turn on and this, that, and the other. So that's probably one of my favorites inside.
I would have to say that's probably a unique exhibit. There can't be a lot of those set up that way around the country.
It's the only one I know of that, well, aside from the larger Army aviation museums and so forth, there are a lot of aircraft inside, but as far as I know at Camp Shelby, this is the only one we have inside.
That is impressive. That's worth the trip alone right there.
Mm-hmm.
That is
we also
fantastic.
have a tank. That's another story, but it's inside as well.
Did you drive it through a wall and just rebuild the wall? The same question applies. How do you get that in the building?
I think with that exhibit, they actually built the museum around it.
Okay.
It's our it's a one-of-a-kind vehicle that's very rare and has been taken care of. It was left behind by the Army on a farm that was in the domain back in 1941 to build the Flora ammunition plant. And when they gave the property back, they happened to forget about this one little item that they left behind. And, it got transferred eventually down here to Camp Shelby and is in our museum.
That also, that right there, that aspect of it is a great example of just how chaotic the times were. How do you forget you have a tank?
It was one of the older models that had been sitting there a while, I think. They had new improved machinery that they were using actually in combat. So it's easier for it to slip their mind, probably.
Yeah, just kind of overlooked it. That kind of thing happens. Tell us a little bit more about the museum as far as when you're open, when people can show up, any kind of special events you have coming up soon.
We will have some closure for holidays around Christmas, a couple of days, I think, the 24th, 25th. But we will be open most of the time, and during the holiday season, our hours are Tuesday through Saturday, and the museum opens at 9 and closes at 4. It's probably good to be there probably about an hour before closing if you really want to get through and see everything. But those are our working times.
Well, and that's the thing, because you mentioned a couple of the larger items, but there's a lot of smaller stuff in there too, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely, and people want to take their time and go through and kind of read some of the information that's associated with it, because it is very easy to overlook a lot of the smaller things. But I always encourage people, hey, come back. You know, it's like Disneyland. You can't go just once. You've got to come back and take your time.
Every time I've ever been to a museum like that, it amazes me when I go back again, I always find something or see something that I didn't see the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing applies, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. And sometimes I've been working here around 4 years, and there are times when I go through and I notice that, and I walk past it every day, and that's probably the reason I walk right past it. But there are things in there that even I find.
So you're guaranteed to find something that you would enjoy there, and I would say you're open tomorrow, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Open tomorrow on Saturday from 9 until 4 on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. I can't think of a better day to go and take in the museum, the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. It's a great resource that we have in the state, I think, because the old expression goes, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. This is a great way to not forget who and what came before.
Exactly. As a veteran, that's what I'm hoping for, is to put that out there. People won't have to repeat the same mistakes of the past.
And also, it's a great reminder of the people like yourself, and thank you for your service, who have sacrificed so much, not even the ones who lost their lives, not just them, but everybody who sacrificed hours, days, months, years of their life in service of this country and keeping this country as great as it is. So that's a great lesson to take from this as well.
Right. And that's what we want to remember also is the family. We do have a couple of exhibits dealing with the Gold Star families that lost loved ones, but we remember all the families of service people and the sacrifices that they made too.
Joe Wise, historian and curator of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. You now have a challenge. Go in there and find something that makes Joe go, wait, where did we get that? That's your challenge now.
I've got an entire catalog of those, so the challenge accepted and done.
I love it. I love it. Joe, keep up the great work and keep things going. And now you just got to figure out how to get like a retired space shuttle in the building. That's about all you got left challenge-wise in terms of the space, right?
There are always possibilities.
Yeah, well, see, I like this guy. Can-do attitude. That's what you're looking for. Thank you so much. We will continue on the Gallo Show on this Friday morning after